paper on that, that's all good.
Yeah. The trouble is, it's like deadlines, how fast do they get going now?
Some of them do, some of them are very lucky.
Yeah. I've got some that will take literally within a week.
Yeah.
Then I got others that do some chasing.
Oh, yeah. Some of them, literally, they'll just pull out a check right there and pretty much right there before you walk in. That's real lucky.
Ed, we're live and it is 9:30.
Good morning. At this time, we'll call to order the Board of County Commissioners meeting for Thursday, July 20. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner
Excuse me,
Schaefer.
let's make that September 20. It feels like July outside, I know.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Here.
Commissioner Allen is absent. Commissioner Klicka.
Here.
Commissioner Osterhaus.
Here.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Here.
Commissioner Brown. He's in the building. Chairman Eilert.
Here. We do have a quorum present. Would you join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would ask those who are present today, if you have a noise-making device, if you would turn it to silent mode or off, as not to interfere with our communications. All of our meetings are streamed online. We have one very special recognition to make this morning. We'll do so at this time. I'm going to ask Jeanette Calm to join me at the podium. Jeanette is the Assistant Operations and Maintenance Director for Johnson County Wastewater. And for several years, our wastewater employees in the department have received special recognition from National Association with their compliance with the National Pollution Standard Permitting. And once again this morning, we're pleased to recognize Johnson County Wastewater and, more importantly, the employees and directors of that service for their outstanding work. So, Jeanette, I'll turn the microphone over to you and we'll proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioners. We really appreciate being here this morning. It's an honor to be here in your presence and to accept the awards that we have coming. It's important that we have recognition for everybody. Of course, we have a lot of our treatment representatives here to help accept the awards, but it's also important for us to recognize the support that we get from everybody around, from our collections crews to the engineering group, which is fantastic, the labs, the community, the customer service groups, all the groups in Sunset, the support that we get from Susan, our director, the directors group within Sunset, and then, of course, also the support that we receive from what I like to call the alphabet soup group, the DTIs and the HRs and the TFMs and all of those out there that help with their expertise so that we can do what we do. Last but not least, of course, your support, your understanding, the time that it takes for you to understand some fairly complex issues that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. That doesn't go unrecognized by any means. It's not the most glamorous, I guess, of subjects to talk about it sometimes, but it is absolutely critical to the well-being, the quality of life, and the Johnson County environment that we have. So that is very important, and your support and your understanding is very appreciated with all that we do. So, thank you.
Are you going to present, make the announcements, or Susan?
I can make the announcements?
Either one. So.
Yeah, however
Susan
you want to
McCarrick, who is a director of Johnson County Wastewater. So,
You're welcome.
I'll have Jeanette help me hand these out.
do it. Okay.
Because I have the mic and it never gets old to celebrate this. I'm going to also thank all of the wastewater staff and everyone here, county manager's office and the commissioners. We do a lot of great work, and every time I walk on a streamway trail or I drive down the street and view our community, I know that we're all a key part of that, and I appreciate the support very much from all of you. So we're going to start with the awards. We're going to start the way NACWA, National Association of Clean Water Agencies, develops their awards. We have silver award, a gold award, and platinum. The first is a silver award, and that is the Nelson Complex. We have someone here from, very good. So we have Gary Long, who's Assistant Superintendent at the Nelson Complex. Jason, I see you over there. You want to come over here and accept? Kyle, are you here? There he is. Kyle Hayward is our superintendent of the Nelson Complex. In order to receive a silver award, you have to have, is it 5 or fewer? I believe it's 5 or fewer. They only had one violation, and I want to highlight, we have over 2,000 compliance points to meet each and every year, so only one violation out of 2,000 is fantastic. Second award is Middle Basin. Middle Basin received a gold award. Yeah, stay up here. You want to do all?
Let's do the photo, right.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Hold that up. Yeah. Ladies, yeah, no. Great job, guys, thank you.
Thank you. Second award is the Gold Award, and that is for our Douglas L. Smith Middle Basin staff. If Middle Basin would come up, I'll introduce you as you're coming. We have Robert Morris, who's the superintendent. We have Chris Moss. We have Tyler. And we have Justin, their assistant superintendents. Our Middle Basin treatment plant received a Gold Award, which means they had no violations for the year of 2017. So we congratulate them on their great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next. All right, next is our Mill Creek wastewater treatment plant. Mill Creek received a platinum award. And the reason I asked for this slip of paper is it's important. This is a Platinum 11 award. And what that means is Mill Creek Treatment Plant has gone 11 years with no permit violations, which is really impressive. And so I would like to introduce the staff. We have one person here who will probably not want me to recognize him, but I have to recognize him because he's retiring tomorrow after 45 years with wastewater, and his name is David Noyes. Come on, David, you have to come first. Thank you, David. David has worked all over this county. He has seen, we were actually reminiscing a couple weeks ago, He's really seen this county grow from one treatment plant up in the northeast corner to the 6 treatment plants that we have all over the county. So he's experienced a lot over the years. Who else do we have from Mill Creek here today? We have Kevin Kimmerer. All right, thank you very much, Platinum 11.
Thank you.
Oh, Joe, where are you? Joe Rodriguez is here too. There we go.
Can't hide from Susan. Excuse me. Congratulations, thank you.
All right, next we have our Tomahawk Wastewater Treatment Facility. They won their first Platinum Award ever last year, which is 5 years with no permit violations. So this will be their 6th year with no permit violations. For those of you that are familiar with Tomahawk, we actually are in the process of constructing a new treatment facility there. So when that treatment facility goes online, we get to start all over again. But I think it's important to celebrate our Tomahawk 6 Treatment Award this year. So who do we have? Jason, do you want to come back up? So Jason was a huge part of that, as well as Mr. Dave Robinson.
Thumbs up on this one.
Good job, thank you.
All right. Next, we have our New Century treatment plant. This is the plant that's located out at the New Century Air Center. And so I know we have George here. There we go, George Cloud, who is the superintendent of the treatment facility. And we have Mr. Vick, Robert Vick. They also received a Platinum 6 this year. Last year was their first year to receive a Platinum, so 6 years, no permit violations.
Thanks, guys, appreciate it. Good job.
Thank you.
Good job.
And last but not least, we have our Blue River Treatment Facility. Blue River is receiving a Platinum 12 award, so 12 years, no permit violations. So congratulations to them. And we have Mr. Jeremy McCracken here. George McLeod is also, or Cloud, excuse me, is also the superintendent for Blue River as well. So both of them. Do you have anyone else here from Blue River?
Nope, just this.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Good job. Thanks, guys.
So I just want to highlight the fact that these folks, their job is not 9 to 5. It's 24/7. We operate 24/7, 365 days a year. And so regardless of what's happening, they get called out in the middle of the night. They've got to come in and keep things running so that we can keep everyone safe. So I truly appreciate everything everybody does. And thanks again. Congratulations on your awards.
Susan, Jeanette, thank you very much for your leadership in Johnson County Wastewater. As you said, it's a activity the county is responsible for most of our county. Parts of Olathe, DeSoto, Gardner, Edgerton, and Spring Hill have their own wastewater systems, but Johnson County serves primarily the rest of the county. And so to receive the kind of recognition that we have consistently, you all have consistently performed at a very high level to deliver quality services to those customers who are in the wastewater district. So thank you to each one of you for the exemplary record that displayed here this morning. And I understand 45 years ago, there might be 30 employees in the wastewater district. And obviously with the increase in population and the number of new additional facilities that we have, that number is much, much larger. So thank you for your 45 years of service and dedication to the customers of Johnson County Wastewater. Thank you all. At this time, we will turn to the public comment portion of our agenda. If there's anyone present who would like to address the commission on an item which does not later appear on our agenda, would invite you to the podium, state your name and address, limit your comments to 5 minutes, and we'll be glad to receive that information. Mr. Raby.
Good morning. Tom Raby, 17513 West 113th Street, Olathe. Someone told me that their city recently became or was on the list of most desirable cities in the country to live in for a variety of reasons. And that's well and good. But I don't know how you can pick a city out of Johnson County like that and say that one is better than the other. There's too many variables, too much subjectivity, and too few quantifiable things. For instance, Overland Park has 3 school districts. If they're grading schools in a city, which one did they give credit to? And of course, you know, you might say, well, why don't they just make the whole county a desirable place? That's my point. Because if you look at other things, transportation, okay, Johnson County does not rank high in public transportation. I don't care how much money we dump into it. It's not set up for public transportation. We don't have any light rail at all. We've got some bus service. So we don't stand out in that area. And that's the county. That's not any particular city. The economy in the county is good. And I don't, you know, maybe you could point to one city as being a little bit on the, you know, ragged shirt tail cousin side, but most of the cities in the county are pretty darn economically viable. And housing, affordable housing has been going away in most of my lifetime, and it's not going to turn around. So there again, you can't pick out one city and say it's got a better housing situation than all the others. And municipal services, I live in Olathe, and I like the municipal services available to me. We've got good trash service, good recycling service, and the city has a good system of making complaints and getting some attention. Whether it'll get resolved to your satisfaction may be another story, but I think that's something that not every city has. And some of the cities in Johnson County are quite small. They can't compare. You know, they borrow or buy services from neighbors and don't stand alone as such. There's only 3 or 4 cities that truly stand alone in the county as municipal giants, so to speak. Crime, I think crime is fairly equal. There might be a few more patrols in certain affluent areas, and crime being reported via the county seat would make Olathe look terrible because all the crime cycles through the county seat in terms of actual prosecution or charges or things like that. So my position is that some cities might have more residents with more money, and some cities might have more open space, and some cities might have more lovely children in the school districts. And remember, there's 6 school districts in the county, so, and they're not roughly equal, but there's not one that's really lagging behind either. So I would say that no city in the county has bragging rights over the other cities in the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? There's no one else to be heard. The public comment portion of our agenda is concluded. Mr. Raby, you gave me an opening, so I'm going to take advantage of it. But back in February, I think it was USA Today named Johnson County as one of the top 25 counties in the country out of more than 3,000 counties to live. And I think, as Mr. Raby indicated, that's a response to the outstanding communities that we have in Johnson County and the outstanding institutions, our schools, higher education. It all comes together to recognize Johnson County as one of the 25 best counties to live in the United States. Turning to notes for the record, I have 2 or 3. I will be signing Administrative Resolution number WD 18-037, enlarging the privately financed sewer district and providing for the assessment of all applicable fees, charges, and levies of the Consolidated Main Sewer District in the vicinity of 175th Street and Schweitzer Road. Also signing a partial release of easement for the Consolidated Main Sewer District due to the removal of sanitary sewer lines in the vicinity of 159th Street and Lowell in the city of Overland Park. Signing a partial release of easement for the Consolidated Main Sewer District due to the removal of sanitary sewer lines in the vicinity of 162nd Street and Lowell Avenue in the city of Overland Park. And finally, signing 2 partial release of easements for the Consolidated Main Sewer District due to the removal of sanitary sewer lines in the vicinity of 110th Street and Knoll Avenue in the city of Overland Park. That concludes the notes for the record. Moving to the consent agenda, will the clerk please read the proposed consent agenda items?
Item number 1, consider approving the August 30th, 2018 business session minutes. Item number 2, please note this is resolution number 076-18. Consider setting a public hearing at 9:30 a.m. on October 11th, 2018, for the purpose of receiving public input on proposed amendments to the FY 2018 budget for the Mental Health Fund, Wastewater, SRC, FP Fund, and Risk Management Fund.
Is there a commissioner who would like to have an item considered separately? Is there anyone present who would like to have an item considered separately? If not, it's back before the commission. Mr. Osterhaus.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Schaefer.
Aye.
Commissioner Klicka.
Aye.
Commissioner Osterhaus.
Aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Aye. Motion carried. Action agenda, item number 3.
Application number NW-PPFP-3418LE. Consider a request from Phelps Engineering Incorporated, Harold Phelps, applicant, and William S. Crooks, landowner, for the preliminary and final plat approval for 2 lots on approximately 81 acres to be known as Kill Creek Point, located at 33300 West 143rd Street.
Mr. Leipzig.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Jay Leipzig, Planning Department. This item is before you under the Northwest Consolidated Zoning Board. That body approved this item on August 20th, 2018 for the preliminary and final plat at 143rd Street. This item, staff is, just to be absolutely clear, staff is recommending denial because it is not consistent with our zoning regulations as they currently read, but this is the work that planning subcommittee has been working on, and we do have a public hearing established for that coming up later on this month. But it's consistent with we've gone through our zoning or planning process and through our DRC process. There are 2 waivers for allow driveways, direct access onto Arterial Street, also a plat exception for a depth to width ratio for Lot 2. And I can show you, there's a better description of it. As I said, it was recommended for approval by the zoning board on August 20th.
Questions? Is the applicant present? Any comments you'd like to make? No comments? And again, Mr. Leipzig, the zoning board recommended approval. The staff is?
We have to technically recommend denial because it is not consistent with our regulations, but this is the items that are being proposed by the planning subcommittee make it consistent with that, and it would be consistent.
Okay, so it would be consistent with that policy that's been under consideration.
That is correct, sir.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the commission on this item? If not, it's back for the commission. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I move to approve a preliminary and final plat for 2 residential lots to be known as Kill Creek Point, plus a waiver from the minimum infrastructure requirements for the reasons and subject to the stipulations recommended by the zoning board. And I move to approve plat exception authorization number 09-20-18 for the reasons recommended by the zoning board.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the application as recommended by the zoning board. Are there any further comments or questions? If not, clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Aye.
Commissioner Klicka.
Aye.
Commissioner Osterhaus.
Aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Aye. Motion carried. Next item.
Item number 4, application number NW-PPFP-3417OL. Consider a request from Bradley N. Hanson, applicant, and Robert C. Bradley, Jr., Marcia Lynn Davison, and Tracy Braid, landowners, for preliminary and final plat for 1 residential lot to be known as Bradley Acres on approximately 30 acres.
Mr. Leipzig.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Jay Leipzig, Planning Department. This item, 127th Street, Moonlight Road, for this plat, so 1-lot subdivision. It came out of the Northwest Consolidated Zoning Board. That body approved this item on August 20th, 2018. Staff is also recommending approval of the item. There's 1 waiver requested, and that would be to provide a driveway access directly onto 127th Street as a Type 1 Carnap Road. With that, I don't have any additional comments, but happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions of the staff? Is the applicant present?
Mr. Chairman, the applicant was not able to make the meeting this morning, nor the engineer, but staff is able to answer any additional questions you might have.
Okay, the applicant has no issues with the recommendation that's been made?
That is correct. In your packet is an email from the applicant stating they weren't able to make the meeting this morning as well.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that to you before.
If there's no one else to be heard, the item will come back before the commission. A motion is in order. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I move to approve a preliminary and final plat for 1 residential lot to be known as Bradley Acres and approval of a waiver from the minimum infrastructure requirement for the reasons and subject to the stipulations recommended by the zoning board.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the application as noted and consistent with the recommendations from the zoning board. Any questions or discussion? There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Aye.
Commissioner Klicka.
Aye.
Commissioner Osterhaus.
Aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Aye. Motion carried. Next item.
Item number 5, resolution number 075-18, application numbers NW-RN2-3408OL, rezoning, and NW-PPFP-3409OL, preliminary and final plat. Consider a request from William Carter, applicant, landowner, for a rezoning from RLD, Residential Low Density District, to RN2 Residential Neighborhood 2 District and preliminary and final plat for 2 residential lots located at 13115 Lakeshore Drive on approximately 5 acres.
Jay.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Jay Leipzig, Planning Department. This item is also out of the Northwest Consolidated Zoning Board for a 2-lot subdivision off of Lakeshore Drive. This item was originally presented for the zoning board on July 16th, then it was continued until August 20th. The recommendation from the zoning board was approval for essentially the critical item is a shared driveway. Staff is recommending approval of the zoning request but denial of the plat application. This item is, let me show you the plat that kind of shows that in more detail. However, there's been considerable discussion and we think this item may need some additional work as well.
Okay. Is the applicant present? Yes. Or any comments you'd like to make? I'll ask you to come to the podium.
My name's William Carter. I live at 13115 South Lakeshore Drive. I've owned the property for 15 years. And we're splitting out on 5.4 acres, 2.5 acres each for a separate lot. We currently live in what would be the north lot and plan on selling that house and building a house on the south lot. My contention is that there's been 2 driveways to this property on Lakeshore Drive since the house was built in 1973. There was a horseshoe driveway that was put in by the original owner that circled around the north driveway up to the front door and out just next to the white fence, which is right near the center of the property line that would currently be dividing the 2 lots. We've asked for the 2 separate drives because it just makes sense. I've also gotten a cost since the shared driveway was approved by the zoning board, which is going to be very expensive to tear out the north driveway and bring it in on a shared driveway in the center of the property. I have had a potential buyer interested in the property and backed out because about 3 days ago he decided that him and his wife didn't want to go with the shared driveway. I've also had the realtor tell me that it's going to impact the value of the house because of a shared driveway. To summarize, it makes no sense to me. I understand the zoning regulations that are in place, but when I have 400 feet of frontage on Lakeshore Drive, and there's always been 2 driveways there to begin with, it just doesn't make sense to me to take to go to the expense of making a single driveway for the property, for both properties. That's it.
So, as I understood Mr. Leipzig's suggestion, this would have to go back to the zoning board for further review. That would be your position, the applicant?
That would be my desire to do it, to go back and see if the zoning board would take another look at it.
Well, I think that's possible. You know, we continue to deal with this issue, and we've had a planning group working on this specific issue for several months. And so I don't have any problem personally with additional review of the zoning board, but I think they need to consider all factors involved. So, other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the commission on this item? All right, if not, it's back before the commission. The motion is in order. Mr. Brown?
Chairman, I'd like to make a comment, and then I'll be happy to make a motion. I continue with the commissioner with the largest district that's rural. I continue to deal with this problem. I know that there has been, the committee's been working on trying to address the concern about shared driveways and frontage and access onto arterials, and I know that continues. I suspect the problems that we struggle with on this are not going to go away as a result of what the modification, some of them will, but not all of the concerns of every citizen are going to go away as a result of that study group that is looking at that. So when those new recommendations come forward, it's not going to address, in my opinion, every concern at every crossroad. So we're going to continue to deal with one-offs as we move along. The other thing I would say, and I have said this since I first sat in this seat, when we talk about this topic, I have great concern about what we're doing with shared driveways. If I live in Lot A and Mr. Carter lives in Lot B, and I can't afford to replace the driveway, but the driveway's crumbling and falling apart, what do you do on a shared driveway scenario? This has been a crossroads that Overland Park, Olathe, and Lenexa have been dealing with, and ultimately, the cities end up absorbing it. And I don't want the county to be in a position of absorbing driveways on houses because of decisions we made today. So that being said, just restating my position from before, my motion would be to remand this back to the Northwest Consolidated Zoning Board for further study.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to remand the item, the resolution and the application back to the zoning board for additional review. Any further comments? The motion is before us. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Aye.
Commissioner Klicka.
Aye.
Commissioner Osterhaus.
Aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Aye. Motion carried. Next item.
Item number 6, the board is setting as the governing board of Fire District Number 2. Item number 6, consider approving the September 2018.
Excuse me, Chairman.
Excuse me?
Cindy.
On the previous item, we do need to announce when it's going back to the zoning board.
Okay, excuse me,
There was more
Jay?
words to that.
You just walked out.
He just walked out.
Well, we can go ahead and read that. I'd be happy to read it.
Okay, we'll come back. It'll ask when the specific date is for the zoning
Do you
board.
have it, Cindy?
All right.
Yeah.
Cindy's got it.
We've got it. I can go ahead and
Go ahead.
if I-
All right.
To keep this moving. And the prior matter, the application will be placed on the agenda for the next zoning board meeting, which is scheduled for October 15th at 7 p.m., but that date may change. Anyone interested in this application should contact the planning department to confirm the meeting date.
Okay, thank you.
Take care of that.
All right, we are sitting as the fire board for District Number 2. Chief?
Jim Francis, Fire District Number 2, here to answer any questions you may have about the monthly accounts payable.
We have to take official action to approve those payables. Are there any questions, Mr. Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was discussed to some extent last week. I did want to direct a question, Mr. Thompson. I personally have not taken the opportunity to go into the details of this, and I am hoping, and I know your accountant does, but I was hoping that someone in TFM or in your office, maybe I should direct it to Mr. Waters, has reviewed it and you're comfortable with it and our approval of it.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. As I've noted previously, we continue to use the district's current process, which is the review by their certified public accountant, essentially attesting to the accuracy and appropriateness of making those payments. As to a secondary review by anyone in our shop, I'm going to defer to the chief on this matter.
Yes, Fire Department staff reviews this, as well as I have met regarding some of these items with Tom Dugan from the budget office.
Okay. Other questions?
Just to follow on then, Mr. Chairman, and the transition to this becoming part of the county's accounting system is on schedule, but probably will not occur until early next year. Is that my recollection?
Actually, at the fire district's next board meeting, which is next Thursday evening, this item will be on your agenda for consideration, a staff proposal at that time. But yes, you are correct. The proposal will be full implementation beginning January 1. Again, as I've stated, due to calendar year matters, auditing cycles, et cetera.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Mr. Brown?
If I could just get a clarification, full implementation of, I'm sorry, Commissioner Ashcraft, you said you were asking a question, but I missed what the topic, what specific. Implementation of what?
The budget will be incorporated. It'll all run consistent with the county.
Okay.
Instead of independently, it'll all coordinate together in our normal processes, correct, Chief?
That's my understanding.
Yeah, well, accounts payable was
Yeah.
the
accounts
particular
payable
element,
system.
yeah,
We see
yeah,
with what we
yeah.
do with TFA.
So-
Right.
So when the chairman signs off on it, he's not attesting to every dollar that he's reviewed and has approved.
No, just every cent.
Every penny.
Mr. Allen also has his name on the.
True. That is true.
All right. Is there anyone present who would like to speak to this item? All right. If not, Mr. Klicka.
I move to approve the payables for September 2018 as shown on the register from August 22nd through September 20th, 2018 for District Number 2.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the payables as noted. Any further questions or discussion, Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question from our perspective. Do we have an idea of when we're planning on this being moved back to a fire board? I've been asked by a couple of people, and I had expressed this when we first took it over, that I'm a little uncomfortable. I live in the 6th District, and I live in the city of Olathe, and I'm making decisions on behalf of patrons and their fire district and their money, and I'm a little uncomfortable with it being in perpetuity. I'm just looking, it doesn't need an answer right now, it's just something to think about. I just would like to start moving toward a goal.
I don't think we've reached that decision point yet.
And I think, first of all, our thought was, Commissioner, was to kind of get the integration squared away so we can kind of get some of that behind us. And then to allow that an advisory board come in place to act as for policy recommendations and not necessarily the administrative duties.
Okay. I'm just uncomfortable. I don't live in that district. I've got some discomfort in making decisions about money that's not my, I didn't put the money into that. Those people that live there did, and I'm more comfortable with them making those decisions. Thank you.
Well, I understand that, but we as a group and individually make decisions impacting other districts in which we do not reside. So this would be consistent with.
Agreed.
With that.
As I said, I've been asked by a couple.
And you do have responsibility, Commissioner, because we ultimately have to approve all the district budgets.
Understood, on an annual basis.
Okay. All right, any other questions, comments? Okay, we do have a motion. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Schaefer.
Aye.
Commissioner Klicka.
Aye.
Commissioner Osterhaus.
Aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Aye. Motion carried. Chief, our next board meeting will be next week, the 27th, is that correct?
September 27th, Thursday night, 6 p.m. at the fire station, 191st and Metcalf.
Okay, thank you very much. So we are sitting as the fire board, and we need a quorum present, so please check calendars. Thank you very much. Are there any other items?
No, sir.
All right, that concludes our regular agenda. Turning to reports and communications, Ms. Postoke Ferguson.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. There's 2 items before you this morning on the manager's memo. First, on October 15th, the City of Gardner, Kansas will hold a public hearing concerning the establishment of a TIF redevelopment district located at the northwest corner of Moonlight Road and Main Street, and then a copy of the materials are attached. The second is an update on an initiative that we discussed with you several months ago, and we want to give a status report on the centralized purchasing for IT and coordination efforts with IT across the county. And I'm going to turn it over to Joe to introduce it, and then Michael Aldridge will be speaking to it. Joe?
Good morning, Commissioners. As Ms. Postoke Ferguson pointed out, this is an update on a process that you all directed us, a path you directed us down earlier this year. We said we'd come back in 4 to 6 months, and I think we're right at about 5 months here. Michael Aldridge, outgoing CIO, and Brian Thompson, interim CIO for the county. I did say Thompson. I should put my glasses on when doing that. Yes, Brian Thomas, of course, who is our interim CIO, effective, I suppose, October the 5th, upon Michael's last day. We'll both be presenting today, and there's a number of items that Michael and Brian will be touching on this morning, actions that will be coming forward in the coming weeks, and you will begin to see more and more of Brian in that lead and less of Michael in the coming weeks.
Okay. Michael.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, thank you, Joe, for the introduction, and thank you, staff, for getting the slides ready for me. Joe, I think you did a great introduction relative to the topic, but I'm going to reference my notes just to make certain that I hit on the key points. This is no more than like 50 or 60 slides, so I'm kidding, it's 10 slides. So as Joe mentioned, back in April, we came and we talked to you about a recommendation. It really brings several initiatives together and showed how they interact and will fit together. And on the following slides, I'm going to give you an update on the effort over the last 5 months. But before I do, this should look familiar to you because this is the essence of the recommendation that I provided you back in April. And I'm just going to pause here a moment and talk to you again about how all of this works together. This will be relative to today's update, but also additionally as Brian and staff continue to work on this going forward. So to begin with, this is references the countywide IT policy and procedures as foundational to the work that stacks on top of that. And the policy and procedures will be coming before you in the coming weeks, we believe before my departure as well. On top of that, of course, there are processes and practices that get down in, give departments and agencies some flexibility in the way they do the work, but again, consistent with the countywide framework. Governance is forever important, and governance and risk, frankly, worked jointly on the development of the policy that we'll be bringing forward here soon. The green area really is where we started focusing on the recommendation in April, and the board visited with us about a desire for increased coordination, consolidation, centralizing IT purchasing efforts, and this, of course, stemmed out of an audit from some years back. And then lastly, we think it's important that every 18 months we bring in an outside organization to do a technology risk assessment I've worked with Ken Kleffner to ensure audit will be included on those reports. That'll give us visibility into how all of the departments and agencies are working on ensuring they are up to speed and consistent with the new countywide IT policies and procedures. I'm going to pause and see if there are questions there, and if not, I'll move into the update. Very good. So we'll start with the centralized IT purchasing. A good many staff have been working a good many hours on this, and I'm pleased to share that we're on schedule for an early 2019 launch. Marcy and Radek are here today, and these two folks have really done a tremendous job moving this forward. They worked to pull an architecture committee together. That committee is working on standardization and replacement cycles, something that we visited about. They pulled together a purchasing development team as well. This is a cross-county team. Various departments and agencies are represented, such that we're working on this. This is bigger than DTI is really the takeaway. They're working on internal processes that will govern the work going forward. When I created these slides, they had already met with 90% of the impacted departments and agencies. And lest you ask, what do you mean impacted? The idea is, of course, that we're changing the way that we're acquiring and managing our assets, which is a change. And of course, we want to make sure that they understand the logic and they're part of that process. And then lastly, on the update, thus far, and this has been low-hanging fruit, but we have begun doing the work this year as well. And on the first 4 orders, we saved the county and the taxpayers $34,000. So I know that's small relative to our budget, but we did want to demonstrate some early success. On the next slide, I'm going to talk about the things that are in front of us, because again, we're not done. We have to finalize our standards. We have to finalize the metrics. The processes, again, are being refined. We talked about an early hire for 2 additional staff, and I just wanted to remind you all and anchor this back because that ask, I understand, is coming in the upcoming weeks. These are early hires for 2019 staff, and those, frankly, are going to be really important to Marcy and Radek and the team to make sure we keep things on track. So hopefully you remember that ask. The next couple slides are around the IT consolidation, and in the same way, we pulled a cross-county team together to work on this. This is touching a good many departments and agencies. We identified 42 positions overall that are going to be evaluated, and I glazed over it, but we are also on schedule for an early 19 launch with this as well, or implementation would be more accurate. We do have a desk audit team that is assembled, and they've begun the work of evaluating the 42 positions that were identified as positions that needed to be looked at. So that work is underway. Next steps, we will be meeting with the impacted departments and agencies. We'll be working together to ensure we understand what their business needs are before making recommendations. And of course, there'll have to be close communication with the staff as we step through those recommendations. But again, a new IT structure will be recommended for implementation early next year. The last two of the four, again, consolidation, purchasing, is the policies, and that, again, that policy resolution will be coming to you in the upcoming weeks. And then lastly, the recurring risk assessments, we're finalizing the process for that, and we'll be ready to go. The idea was to begin those risk assessments around third quarter of next year, but we still need to select the vendor. Funding is already secured for that, but did want to give you an update on that. And so just, again, to tie it all together, the vision, as we talked about back in April, is being realized. When the board approves the policy and procedures, that'll provide us the foundation in the coming weeks. We are moving towards fewer IT groups, increased standardization, increased efficiencies, reduce risk, which is something that was important to many of you when we had our conversations, and a standardized replacement cycle, which of course gets to the disposal of the equipment as well. It's not just about acquiring it, it's about maintaining a good inventory and making sure the disposal process is managed properly as well. With that, Brian and I will stand for any questions you'll have.
Questions? Mr. Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Aldrich, I wanted to start by saying congratulations on the next chapter in your life. I've enjoyed working with you and bantering with you and being lectured by you, and I appreciate your insights and the efforts that you brought forward to the county. It's been worthwhile, and I think it's a good foundation for some of the issues we face. And I think you've touched upon several of those in this presentation. There is a financial component, and there's an ever-increasing risk component. And I hope that Mr. Thomas is up to it. I'm sure it will go forward, but the more rapidly, the quicker it can happen, I think probably the better. I think we all recognize that. And I'm going to wish you well. But having said that, a couple of questions, if I could follow up with you on slide 8, you're talking about identifying 42 positions of possible consolidation. Could you elaborate on that? Is that county-wide? And I think in particular, does it involve the libraries? Because there was some sensitivity with the libraries at one time, and there may be others too. And to make sure that that's moving forward as expeditiously and realistically as possible, given the sensitivities and the needs of operations. And any observations
Yes,
there
sir.
would be appreciated.
And first, thank you for your kind words, Commissioner Ashcraft. I've also enjoyed working with all of you, commissioners, and being lectured by you as well, Commissioner Ashcraft. So as it relates...
Really?
As it relates to the positions, the 42, that does represent countywide, with a few exceptions. Parks, library, and gyms are largely excluded. And I say largely because, as we talked about early on, we wanted to exclude those for the initial phase, the evaluation process. And so where there is an exception to that exclusion, there are a good many positions where those positions exist also in DTI and gyms, and we thought it only fair that they also be evaluated, if that makes sense.
Okay, very good. And then on slide 7, you talk about a new IT structure will be recommended. Is that just for the current DTI department, or is this structure, will there be a restructuring of all the countywide IT functions and potentially different management alignments there?
Yes, sir. Well, the reality is many of the efforts we're talking about today, it is impacting the way the departments and agencies are working together. The purchasing development team, the architecture committee, as good examples of how we're going to be doing more collaboration per the direction of the board and frankly per good best practice. But as it relates to what my intention was behind the structure, this really links back to those 42 positions where as we evaluate the work they're doing and focus on the department and agencies' goals and objectives, some of those staff may begin reporting up through either DTI or GIMS, as a for example. So that's really what we meant by the new structure.
Okay, thank you. That's a good clarification. Operationally, I can understand managers' desire to make sure that there's proper supervision, but structurally and organizationally, when it comes to program performance, I personally don't care who you report to. It's what the impact is on service and cost, and it sounds like you're taking that into consideration, and that's fine. That's good.
Any other questions? Mr. Aldridge, let me say thank you for your service to the county. You've done an outstanding job as we began this process 2 or 3 years ago in bringing together various elements of our technology work, and so this is another important step in moving towards that conclusion of that process. So thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thanks. Anything else?
Nothing further, and I think Michael's going to be back next week to do one more item before he leaves. Is that correct, Joe?
Well, yes, but like I said,
one of the two.
Ryan, whatever his name is over there, will be.
I will be back.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. Anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Turning to commission comments, Mr. Schaefer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few things occurred this last week. We had a chance, a few of us had a chance to attend the American Royal Barbecue last Friday night. Chair and I were at the Taste of Leawood. I think that's the 9th annual one, last Saturday night. Quite an event, sponsored by the Leawood Chamber of Commerce. Attended my Home Association meeting picnic on Sunday afternoon, and yes, the homes associations are still alive in our communities, including mine, okay? And also, yesterday afternoon, I attended our Consolidated Fire District Number 1 board meeting, and we had a walkthrough of our new fire department that's under construction, about 50% complete. It's going to be quite impressive when it's complete. So I want to give a shout out to the chief and the board there for moving forward, and the citizens of our community that will benefit from that new building. It's going to be quite nice for us. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Klicko.
Mr. Chairman, I gave incorrect dates last week relative to the park openings here. So just to give the correct ones here, this weekend is Big Bull Creek Park, and Commissioner Brown, I believe you will be there. It's in your district, and we're excited to see that one kick off on Saturday. And then the following Saturday, on September 29th, will be the Stillwell Community Park, and the highlight there will be the inclusive playground. So we definitely want to see as many people out there to see the new assets that are being provided here to our citizens. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ashcraft?
Nothing, sir.
Mr. Osterhaus?
Just a few things. So this week we've had our JCAB meeting and the Intergovernmental Policy Academy meetings, and in both of those, the subject of jobs for youth came up and ways to keep them out of jail or recidivism, or lowering recidivism rates from juveniles who've ended up in our correction system. So I'm going to ask, I don't know that it'll take 4 hours, but I'm going to ask that Maury, if it's possible, will reach out to Keely Schneider with Workforce Development and kind of make those connections so that we can kind of bring that to the forefront. Also, kind of a very random deal, but my postman lives in Stillwell, and he mentioned to me that he has some neighbors that refuse to cut their grass. And so he was wondering if the commission could look into a way similar to what some of the cities have on grass and grass heights. So I don't know. I forwarded that email on to Jay, so hopefully we can look into something like that. But that may require a little bit more than 4 hours, so I just wanted to mention that.
Depends on the size of the mower.
Yes, it depends on, yeah, that's right, how big the tractor is. And that is all I had, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a few items. Would like to just call attention to the fact that this past week in our newspaper of record in the metropolitan area, Division of Child and Family Services, it was reported, has been placing children in offices to sleep, and that an alleged rape occurred of a 13-year-old as a part of that program, which begs the question, has anybody been running Kansas? Has anybody been running our state? Johnson County Driver's License Office has been a mess. I am happy to report I was there yesterday and got my license renewed and actually got through in a reasonable amount of time. So without calling anybody, I just walked in like everybody else. And so, I don't know, maybe that's improved. We'll find out in time. I attended a meeting in Sedgwick County on Monday with Fire District Number 1, Chief Kirkenmeyer. Went down on some just fire-related topics and, that they're working on, and met with some really great folks from Sedgwick County from their fire district. They were going through a really tough time, having lost a deputy on Sunday afternoon. So Monday morning meeting was a tough one, but they held to it and they were there, and it probably kept it short because they had other things that they needed to get back to. But our friends in Sedgwick County, it was nice to get to visit with them. And then would point out that Gerald Hay and I have been working on, along with others, not just he and I, but he and I on a regular basis talking about it. We're moving forward on a Kansas Gold Star Memorial for Gold Star families, military families who have lost a loved one in the line of service. And it's going to be located in Olathe. We finally got the final costs, final drawings. We're getting a small modeling of it. And I will be moving into the fundraising mode. So all of you will be hearing from me looking for money. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Congratulations to the board and directors of Sunflower House. Had an outstanding breakfast Tuesday morning as a fundraising effort. And also this evening, Friends of JCDS will also have a fundraising event. So we're looking forward to a successful event there. We do have a request for an executive session. Why don't we try in about 25 minutes?
Okay. I'll move that the board recess its open meeting and convene an executive session at 10:55 a.m. for a period of 10 minutes for the purpose of receiving advice of counsel and to preserve attorney-client privilege for communications related to pending litigation, and to reconvene an open session in this room at approximately 11:05 or as soon thereafter as the executive session may end.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the request for the executive session. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Schaefer.
Aye.
Commissioner Klicka.
Aye.
Commissioner Osterhaus.
Aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Aye, motion carried. That concludes our regular business agenda. We are in recess, and we'll reconvene an open session following our executive session, as noted. We will come back for agenda review just as soon as we can get the equipment transferred. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Here's 5 and 6. Okay.
Shoot, I invested in that organization on a monthly basis, so we'd think they would have made sure that.
Whenever we're ready.
They deduct something from my credit card every month.
Gentlemen, we have 4, so we need to get started. At this time, we'll call to order the Board of County Commissioners meeting for the purpose of agenda review for next week's business session. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Schaefer. Here. Commissioner Allen is absent. Commissioner Klicka.
Here.
Commissioner Osterhaus.
Here.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Here.
Commissioner Brown.
Here.
And Chairman Eilert.
Here. We do have a quorum present. Would the clerk please read the proposed consent agenda items?
Item number 1, consider reappointing Richard Marion as the 4th District Representative to the Developmental Supports Board through August 31st, 2021. Item number 2, consider appointing Gina Ortiz as the 5th District Representative to the Commission on Aging through August 31st, 2021. Item number 3, consider reappointing Randy Hutchins as the 6th District Representative to the Planning Commission through October 4th, 2021.
Any questions on those proposed items? If not, we'll move to the action agenda. Next item.
Item number 4, consider approving the September 6, 2018 business session minutes.
We had a couple of absentees that will remain on action. Next item.
Item number 5, consider approving the proposed 2019 County Assistance Road System Program expenditures in an amount not to exceed $16,060,000.
Mr. Lage.
Good morning, Commissioners. Kent Lage, Urban Services, Johnson County Public Works. I just want to note, Commissioner Klicka, you and I had a brief discussion about how you appreciate succinct presentations. So this presentation was 6 slides last year, and it's 5 slides this year, just to try to make sure I get your vote.
You beat IT. Congratulations.
So I'm here today to present the recommended expenditures for the 2019 CARS program of $16,060,000 to fund 14 projects in 12 cities. This has been reviewed and recommended by the Technical Review Committee, or TRC, at its July 16th meeting. The TRC is comprised of a voting member from each of the cities in Johnson County, as well as a representative from unincorporated Johnson County. The program, as presented, complies with our policies and procedures and is consistent with previous years' programs. So our vision and mission statement from our recently approved strategic plan, we had the 4, I just want to spend a moment on the 4 strategic areas: livable streets, multimodal transportation, intelligent transportation, and additional funding. We are focused on those first 3 right now, looking at policies and procedures as has been identified in our strategic plan. So that is moving forward. So the funding sources for the CARS program are the Special City County Highway Fund, or the gas tax as we call it, county support, which is .343 mils, which was established quite a number of years ago, and then the use of reserves, and the reserves are funds that come back as a result of projects coming in under budget by the cities. And yes, projects do come in under budget once in a while, so that's always good news for us. The funding then that we allocate to the cities is based on the 80% rule, which was developed by the Technical Review Committee a number of years ago. And at a very high level, the funding is based on a city's population and assessed valuation compared to countywide population and assessed valuation. A city will receive funding for a project as long as it meets our criteria and if they submit it. So in front of you here are the 14 projects in the 12 cities that we are funding this year. Projects range from mill and overway to system management improvement to street widening and reconstruction. Funding from the CARS program ranges from $500,000 to $2.9 million. Project details are in the expenditures packet that is part of this briefing sheet. There are also, and when we note that this in the briefing sheet, in the CARS packet, there are 14 projects that were not funded this year because of funding constraints. Those 14 projects that were not funded would have constituted approximately $6 million in CARS funding. for a total project cost of $16 million for those projects that were not funded. So here's a map showing the distribution location of the projects throughout the county. The numbers on the map correlate back to the previous slide showing the projects. As a reminder, we do fund 50% of construction costs for the CARS program. Several projects receive less than 50% funding, either because of ineligible costs or because of state and federal funds that are received by the cities. Approximately 1/3 to 1/4 of the $58 million of total project costs shown on those 14 projects we are funded, approximately 1/3 to 1/4 of that is funded through the CARS program. That's quite a good leverage of county funds for the improving the roads system throughout Johnson County. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Mr. Lage, would you speak to the 80-20 share? You just mentioned 50-50. What are the circumstances as to whether I get 80-20?
Oh, okay. So the 80% rule just says that a city, so that's on how we distribute the funds to the city. So the 80% rule identifies that over a 5-year rolling period, a city will receive 80% of its theoretical calculated value based on assessed valuation and population. So the 80% rule is a basis for the theoretical amount that should go to each city. The 50% then is what we will fund 50% of eligible construction costs.
Okay. Questions? Mr. Ashcraft.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lage, good presentation as always. And I very much appreciate your efforts to develop a strategic plan and frame this program. That was a big step. The one thing I continue to struggle with, and I was hoping to see something in here, maybe it is and I just haven't identified it, is the concept of AI, artificial intelligence, and its impact on improving capacity of the existing system rather than just building more lanes. Sure. And I know there's a lot of maintenance in here, but I just did not see much emphasis. Is it in here somewhere and I just am not looking in the right place?
I'll give you an answer and see if I answer your question. So we currently fund components of projects that lead towards intelligent transportation, which to me, artificial intelligence would be a component of that. So we fund fiber to the streetlights. We fund the network to allow streetlights to coordinate together. So we fund components. We fund crosswalk signalization that is tied back to the streetlights and make sure things are working appropriately from a technology perspective. I think the real change for where you're heading is going to be in the implementation of the strategic plan with the intelligent transportation. We're actually having some discussions that intelligent transportation is actually a subset of smart cities. So we are heading down the direction of discussing intelligent transportation, but there's a much bigger picture that we think we're going to need to include others in this discussion beyond transportation to where smart cities is and where it's going. So maybe the answer is we are heading in the direction of technology through the intelligent transportation component of our strategic plan. Does that
I think it probably does, and we can talk more offline. I respect the concept of smart cities. I just refer back to that Carnegie Mellon pilot in Pittsburgh and the results that they have had. And also my understanding is the city of Olathe is partnering with one automotive manufacturer to start to do something. But I just did not see it clearly identified. If it's a strategic objective, it's just not here.
AI specifically is not a line item for us. Intelligent transportation is, and to me, intelligent transportation, AI is a component of that.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. Well, we will have several people here, I'm sure, next week to speak to this item, so it'll remain on action. Item number 6.
Thank you.
Consider approving the proposed 2019 Stormwater Management Program expenditures in an amount not to exceed $18,295,330.
Mr. Kellenberg.
Good morning, Commissioners. Lee Kellenberger, Johnson County Stormwater Management Program. This is a request for your approval of the Stormwater Management Program's 2019 program expenditures. I'm not quite as succinct as Kent. I have 9 slides. I apologize, but I will get through this relatively briefly.
50% less succinct.
Similar to CARS, our program expenditures have been prepared in accordance with our policies and procedures and are consistent with our previous year's expenditures. But as you will see, our 2019 program, we are starting to incorporate some of the recommendations of our strategic plan. So you'll see a few new elements in our presentation today. And they've also been recommended for your approval by the Stormwater Management Advisory Council. I've taken a few key tables and figures out of our expenditures packet and for assist you to follow along today. Just to refresh everyone's memory of where these funds come from. In 1988, the Kansas legislature passed some enabling legislation that allowed counties to adopt a sales tax for the purpose of funding stormwater management. Johnson County was the only county to implement that tax. Subsequent to creating the tax, the board created the Stormwater Management Program and the Stormwater Management Advisory Council, commonly referred to as SMAC. We together, the program staff and SMAC, work together to oversee the collection of those funds and recommend expenditures to you, the board. We also recently completed our strategic plan, and here are our vision and mission statements from that plan. Our vision is what we aspire to achieve, and our mission statement is how we intend to get there. Moving on to the expenditures, this table here shows an overview of the entire program. At the top, you can see the total funds available at $18,463,501. This is a combination of revenue generated from the countywide sales tax and a carryover of previous year's unspent funds. Below that is our summary of expenditures totaling $18,295,330. Approximately $13.3 million of that, or 72%, is budgeted for watershed improvement projects. Approximately 21% is budgeted for stormwater planning and support projects. $750,000 is budgeted for system management projects. And the remaining 3% is budgeted for program administration. This includes staff salaries. Support from other county departments, and our operating expenses. This leaves approximately $168,171 as unobligated funds, which will be carried over to the next year's budget. The next couple of slides go into more detail on those projects we intend to fund. This slide covers our SMP planning and support projects. At the top, the largest expenditure is going to be $2,500,000 for our studies. The majority of these funds will be used to develop watershed master plans. This was one of the main outcomes of our strategic plan. And these master plans will be the guiding documents for our newly created watershed organizations. And I know that the cities are excited to get these planning process underway. This is where we will look at the watersheds holistically, without regards to jurisdictional boundaries, and look at problems and start identifying solutions. In addition, you can see some of the additional funding amounts for ongoing efforts that we have, our Stormwatch system and our USGS streamflow gauging system. This section 3, our system management project, this is a new program. That is a result from our strategic plan. We are budgeting $750,000 for system management, specifically for inventory and condition assessment work. We are working on developing the policies and procedures around this program, and I don't think we're going to be quite ready to start funding actual system replacement in 2019, but there is a lot of work that we can still do on the inventory and condition assessment side to help cities get their system and data up to speed, so we know and exactly we can start quantifying what the need is around system replacement. Next is our watershed improvement projects. These are our water quality and flood damage reduction projects. We are budgeting $675,000 for NPDES Phase 2 support services. These are efforts that help our cities satisfy the requirements related to water quality and their permits. Below that, you can see water quality improvement and preservation. We don't anticipate actually funding any of these projects in 2019. Again, those projects will start to be identified as part of our watershed master planning exercise that I talked about earlier, and we anticipate that funding starting to come online in 2020 and beyond. And finally, we budgeted $12,577,388 for flood damage reduction projects. We will be funding 7 different projects in 3 different cities and 1 in unincorporated Johnson County, actually out at the New Century Air Center. The stormwater management programs fund 75% of design and construction, and the city where the project is located funds the remaining 25%. And here's a map showing the location of those projects. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kellenberger, I, with you, share the excitement of the shift in your strategic approach to watersheds. And I know you are working with the cities. You've met with some, maybe all city councils by now, and I think there's a momentum there. So I commend you on that. I was looking at it, and it even looks like everything's still kind of categorized by cities, and I realize that that's a seismic shift. So you know, I'm looking with anticipation. The one question I had, though, and this came to mind recently from the flooding due to Florence in the Carolinas, that there have been problems upstream from some of the communities of waste disposal lagoons, not to be too graphic, and with the flooding then causing downstream issues. And I was wondering if we have looked at that issue, not just in Johnson County, but potentially outside of Johnson County. I mean, I don't know how all the watersheds work here, but has that been considered by the Stormwater Advisory Group? It's a kind of a public health issue, but under those catastrophic circumstances, have we considered that? Do we have a plan in place, or is that considered when we make these changes? I know we control the water in the county, but sometimes it's the water outside the county?
Yeah. You know, that's a great point, and that's a good question. To my knowledge, we you know, I don't know how many lagoon systems we have, open water lagoons. I'd have to ask JCW, but as part of this analysis, as part of the watershed studies, I think that would be a good thing to bring in our emergency management teams, looking at high hazard dams, looking at other assets in the watersheds that could rupture or burst or something in an event like that, an extreme event. So. I think those are probably in our countywide hazard mitigation plan, so that'd be a good thing to incorporate into our watershed master planning as well.
Okay. Well, I'd be interested in learning more when you get an opportunity.
Great.
All right, again, there probably will be interested speakers next week on this item, so it'll remain on action. Next item.
Thanks.
Item number 7, consider approving a real estate lease agreement with Kansas Department for Children and Families for the building at 301 North Monroe, Olathe, Kansas.
Ms. Morrissey.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Kim Morrissey, Facilities. I am here today to talk about the lease agreement, a potential lease agreement with the county and the Kansas Department for Children and Families. And this is for the building at 301 North Monroe, which is also known as the Adolescent Center for Treatment. And that building was vacated in 2016 when the mental health program that was run out of that facility moved to the Youth and Family Services building. And due to the deteriorated condition of the building and the need for significant improvements and the lack of the county's need for residential space, we had requested, and it was approved for $100,000 to demolish that building. In May of this year, we were made aware of a dire need that the DCF had to find temporary housing for children in need. And so we were asked to try to work an agreement with the DCF for this facility. We have negotiated a 1-year lease whereby, and it's renewable for 1 year, and the DCF will operate, maintain, and repair that facility in lieu of rent, and they will make the modifications required to bring it up to code and to meet their needs. The county does have the approval rights for any improvements that they want to make to the building. And then they also have to get permits from the city of Olathe. So I have representatives from DCF. I have Daniel Klukas with DCF, and I have Chad Anderson with KVC, who they intend to operate the facility, if you have any questions for any of us.
Ms. Morrissey, thank you for bringing this to us. I know there's been several months of discussions and negotiations with DCF. And just to point out, the county is providing this facility at no cost to the state of Kansas. And DCF, for the state of Kansas, will be responsible for all operational costs as well as any modifications or ongoing maintenance to the facility. So let me say to facilities and staff, thank you for working towards this agreement. I think at least on a short-term basis, it could help very much the situation involving housing issues that DCF has. So glad to see that the county is stepping up to do its part and to help out. Mr. Osterhaus?
Just a real quick question. Do you know how many children or families may be housed here? Do we have any idea of the?
Approximately 25.
Okay, thank you.
Should also note there are separate facilities available for boys and girls, right? Yes, all right. Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Chairman.
It's for ages 10 and over.
Pardon?
It's for kids 10 and over, 10 years of age and over.
Right, okay, thank you.
I assume that what the state has planned, and maybe the gentleman with us can clarify that, but the improvements to the facility, I assume, are going to be, I'd guess, considerably better than housing them on a floor in an office. So to that end, I'm also thankful to facilities for getting this coordinated, to our county for stepping forward, and for making this opportunity available. As I had said in my commissioner comments, I have huge concerns about what's going on in our state right now, and my confidence in our state has been shaken on several topics, and that's one of them. So I'd appreciate any background you could give us or to me about what the condition of the building is now and what it's going to be upon completion.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Dan Klukas. I'm a Deputy Secretary with the Department for Children and Families. And I do want to first echo what you've said about your staff. They've been very gracious to us. It's not something that DCF does typically, is going out and looking for more facilities to run one, but just the particulars of this location and that you guys didn't want to lease it to someone else, so we stepped in, and you guys have been great, so we thank you. And yes, sir, we understand there's a shortage of foster parents, and it was many years ago, and I'm an operations guy, and maybe Chad Anderson with KVC will step in and help me. He knows more about the programmatic. But there was a reduction in PRTFs, our higher level of homes. And so now we have a lot of kids that have issues that most foster parents, you know, your neighbors on the street, can't handle. And after so many days of doing this, they just won't do it anymore because it puts their family in jeopardy, and it actually puts those kids that we place with them in jeopardy as well. So we were looking for a place, and again, your staff, Ted Jester and Robert Sullivan, were really great and showed us what they have. And they said, you know, we have this old building over here, but there's no chance, guys. And could we just look at it? We need something. So that's where we are now, sir. We understand we have a problem, and we are working diligently to fix it. And you know, not to get too much in the program stuff because that's not my specialty. We are looking at you know, maybe too many kids are coming into foster care on one side, and so we're trying to work with that. We have a new secretary, Secretary Meyer Hummel, who's very involved in a lot of this. I mean, she's in the day-to-day operations of our provider. She's working with them to try to solve this problem because, I mean, we're not trying to warehouse kids. We love kids just like anybody else does, and we're trying to do the best thing for them. So, but if you want a little bit more history, maybe Chad can provide that for you.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman, committee members.
My name is Chad Anderson. I'm the president for KVC Kansas. I'm the chief clinical officer for KVC Health Systems. Let me address Commissioner Brown's comments earlier. I completely agree with you. The event that occurred in our office is a tragedy and one that we all come into this field to prevent. And we take full responsibility for the situation. A staff member left the room. It was a 1-to-3 ratio. There was a staff member there. These weren't kids that were spending the night in the office. 1-to-3 ratio, which is as low as any hospital across the state of Kansas. So most shelters are at a 1-to-5 ratio. So I made sure that there was a staffing ratio appropriately. The staff left when one of the 2 kids were still in the room, left them unsupervised for a matter of minutes, and came back, immediately called the police. This is all information in the paper, but I want to make sure that you knew some of the details that the paper shares is not specific. And so immediately called the police. And this is an ongoing investigation, so I'm not going to share anything that's going to interfere with that. But at the same time, the police released the 18-year-old back to us that evening. Okay. So I think in consideration of that particular event, we were unaware that the word rape was even in effect in May when the incident occurred. It wasn't until Friday of last week that a charge was, which is 19 weeks later. So we do our best to keep kids safe. I think what I would say to the committee is in 2012, we had 5,000 kids in care, 5,182 kids in 2012. In 2018, we had 7,670 kids, which is an increase in 2,488 children in that time, 48% of the fiscal year 2012. So we have had an influx, an overwhelming wave of youth in state's custody. Not due to DCF, it's a statewide and nationwide issue. I want you all to know that. Opioid epidemic, lack of substance abuse, lower funding. The other piece that I want to bring up that directly relates to the opportunity that we have in Johnson County, I'm a Johnson County citizen. Johnson County leads the way in many ways across the state. This is one of those areas that I think we will lead the way. In 2011, we had 780 residential beds. Remember the number, lower youth in 2012, we had 780 beds. These are treatment beds. In 2017, we had 272. It's a reduction of 500 beds. So there's 500 kids throughout the state of Kansas that are roaming around, hopefully seeking treatment, getting outpatient services. But the reality is, if you ask Tim DeWeese at Johnson County Mental Health, those funds are reduced as well, right? So we're left with a system-wide issue. The youth in offices, I wanted to state this too. We had not had any youth in offices from May 10th until August 30th. Around the date of August 30th, we had to get rid of some residential beds due to some situations in Wyandotte County. We then had kids in an office, KVC, had kids in an office on August 31st, 2 kids, and September 1st, 3 kids. Since September 1st, we've had no kids in an office, okay? Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. I am an open book. I am not hiding anything. We are fully aware of the situation, the tragedies that are occurring. This is a result of a system issue. KVC has been a leader in the agency, or in the country, in child welfare and residential care. I speak throughout the country on residential care. I speak throughout the country on child welfare practices. So I don't do that to tout it. I do that to say we've got really good people trying to do some really good work in the state of Kansas and for Johnson County. And this is an opportunity with this residential placement that we can ensure that children are not sleeping in beds, in offices.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. I should also note that our juvenile court judges have also been involved in this, and I think we're at this point because of that initiative that has been taken by those judges. So thank you to our juvenile judges also. Questions, Mr. Ashcraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry. Mr. Chairman, I'm supportive of this, and if you want to move it to consent, I'm fine with that. I did have a procedural question, though. The monies that were approved in CIP, do they go back into reserves, and will they be reallocated or hold in abeyance until a future decision is made?
We would propose that they remain in the project until the KVC is done with the building and that we could proceed with demolition.
Okay.
So we want to retain those
So,
funds.
so in 10 years from now, if they're still there, well, I mean.
Yeah, understand.
Yeah, okay.
Understand, thank you. Consent?
Yes.
Any problem?
No.
All right.
Chairman, I'd prefer to keep it on action.
All right, so noted. It'll remain on action. Next item. Thank you.
Item number 8, request for a proposal, RFP number 2018-062. Consider authorizing a contract with Henry Wurst Incorporated for printing and mailing services for publications created and distributed by the Johnson County Public Information Office, Johnson County Park and Recreation District, and Johnson County Library at a cost not to exceed $325,000 for a period of 1 year, with the option to renew for 4 additional 1-year periods.
Okay. Ms. Symes.
Good morning, Chairman Eilert and Commissioners. Robin Lyons, Purchasing Manager. The item before you is a new contract for printing and mailing of publications, mainly magazines and catalogs, produced and distributed by the Public Information Office, by Johnson County Library, and Johnson County Parks and Rec. As you're well aware, resident feedback indicates that the magazines and catalogs are a highlight to them and a great communication tool. Just a little background on this item. April of 2017, a RFP was issued that combined printing and mailing services for 4 key areas. We were trying something new. We were trying to combine some areas to have some economies of scale. So we combined billings, magazines and catalogs, elections materials, and mail services. Each one of those sections of the RFP were evaluated and awarded separately. Due to the depth of the combined services, only 2 vendors responded to the magazine and catalog category in 2017. At that time, a contract is awarded to Single Source for a 1-year term with 4 optional 1-year renewals. The original contract term is set to expire at the end of this month. Standard county practice in renewing contracts is to review them 60 days prior to expiration to determine contract performance. If the county feels that it is in their best interest to solicit a new contract, instead of granting the optional renewal, a new solicitation is issued, which was the case in this situation. All vendors at that point have a new opportunity to respond to a new solicitation and demonstrate to the county how a new contract award may be improved. 6 responses were received for this solicitation. All 6 of the vendors were interviewed, which includes the current vendor. Some of the items that were looked at for this were color quality, age of the equipment, and the equipment maintenance. Those were some of the determining factors in the award of this new contract. The evaluation committee was made up of representatives from the Public Information Office, Johnson County Parks and Recreation, and Johnson County Library. The top-ranked firm here that is being recommended is Henry Wurst, and the cost is consistent and in line with the other proposals. We are seeing an increase in cost due to some closures of paper mills, and we really do look at all of the cost. It's really hard to determine and to compare when our client base changes, the number of people that we're sending the publications out to changes, as well as the number of pages that are being in each one of the publications. But we do provide a sample and get pricing on that to be able to compare. And with that, I stand for questions.
Okay, questions?
Mr. Chairman, to simplify it, we're just going out for bid for our publications, correct?
Right.
And we're doing the best of, we followed the process, the RFP, and we're doing the best thing to do it.
And this is the
And this go on
recommendation.
consent.
This is the recommendation as a result. Mr. Brown, you have a question?
I have several, thank you. We have a current not to exceed $325,000 per year with a renewal for 4 additional years. What is the current not to exceed contract amount with Single Source?
So I looked at the executed contract document that we have, and as a part of this process, the entire award was $1.1 million. It was for all categories. So the contract was actually written as a no guaranteed minimum, and that was the language in the contract, with a not to exceed $1.1 million for all of the vendors that were awarded the contracts in 2017. The bid tabulation was also attached to that contract, so one would reasonably think that the vendor would get at least that amount. That was $206,000 approximately. Year-to-date expenditures to the current vendor is $252,000.
So we're paying $252,000 in the current contract, and we still have at least, how many years for option to renew on the old contract? How many years were left?
It was a one-year agreement with 4 annual optional renewals.
And when was the contract signed? Was that 17?
It was signed in 17, so it is set to expire the end of this month, September 30th.
But 4 more years of renewal at what, the 1.7 total, or 252,000 versus 325,000 that you brought before us?
That was an option.
Okay.
However, as stated, the contract itself was not to exceed 1.1 million, so even though we've spent, or they could think that we were going to spend around 205,000 per the last contract, we've already spent 252, and it is a moving target, as I said, based on the amount of pages that each publication end up having.
So is the 325,000 not to exceed a moving target, or is that a real number?
That is the actual number.
But we didn't have a real number in the previous contract. We had a moving target in the previous, but we got a hard number now. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
Thank you. Okay, and then a couple of other questions. Where is Henry Wurst, Inc. based? Where is their home office?
Kansas City, Missouri.
Kansas City, Missouri. And where is Single Source based?
Lenexa.
Lenexa, Kansas. Okay. And then I understood that there was a problem with the previous contract that had to do with delivery. So I have a question. Is there a guaranteed delivery, and what is the consequence if the publications are not in the mailboxes at the date that has been prescribed? Assuming there has been a given date or a time frame, what is the penalty? What is the downside to Henry Wurst, Inc. for not hitting that date?
So as with all contracts, if there are issues, we work with the vendor very closely and communicate with them. We go down with them over a list of items that we would like cured, and talk about the communications and all of those types of things. So we would follow that same procedure with any vendor, regardless of whether it's a printer or an engineer or any type of service that the county procures.
Okay. And when there's a problem, for instance, with advertising and something doesn't turn out quite right, is the vendor asked to reimburse for the cost of that?
I'm not sure what was asked in this situation.
I'd like to know. So who in this room knows the answer to that one?
We can find out.
I would appreciate knowing that. And I've got several more questions about this, but I don't need to belabor it. But I absolutely do not want this on consent agenda. In fact, I would like to propose pulling it off of consent and action for next week for further review by the Board of County Commissioners.
I would disagree with that. I don't have a problem remaining on action, and I don't want to get into specific details, but there were significant challenges to the current vendor's performance, and those, in my judgment, were really not acceptable. And so I think we need to proceed with a decision on this item. Mr. Osterhaus?
I was just going to recommend that maybe purchasing can meet with Commissioner Brown to help alleviate some of his concerns about the...
We've already had a meeting earlier this week, but I'm happy to meet again.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Ashcraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Lyons, I want to thank you for reviewing this contract as all contracts and looking at the vendor options and bringing forward another proposal. I have tried to figure out the code in terms of the cost of the various options versus the cost that Henry Wurst is proposing. And it looks like from the best or least cost option, which is firm D, to the Henry Wurst, it's about a $64,000 premium. It's $64,000 more than the lowest. And I was wondering if staff could elaborate on the value proposition that Henry Wurst is offering that is worth $64,000 a year over 5 years, which is, if my math is correct, about $300,000, $350,000. Help me understand that, and we can do this offline if you'd like. But that's a kind of a traditional question I have. I know you have some topics covered here, but the helping me understand will help me make a final decision. So thank you for the effort, or whoever was involved in that decision.
Okay.
Staff is happy to meet with you throughout the week.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, well, this will remain on action. Are there any other items?
No, sir.
All right, that concludes our agenda review. We do need to reset our executive session. We are currently at 11:17. Mr. Osterhaus.
I'll move that the board recess its open meeting and convene an executive session at 11:20 for a period of 10 minutes for the purpose of receiving the advice of counsel and to preserve attorney-client privilege for communications related to pending litigation, and to reconvene an open session in this room at approximately 11:30 or soon thereafter as the executive session may end.
Do I hear a second? Second. Motion's made and seconded in regards to the executive session reset. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Aye.
Commissioner Klicka.
Aye.
Commissioner Osterhaus.
Aye.
Commissioner Ashcraft.
Yes.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
And Chairman Eilert.
Aye. Motion carried. We continue to be in recess from our regular session. Our executive session will begin at 11:20, and we'll reconvene an open session following conclusion.
Okay.
approximately 11:30 a.m. We reconvened in open session. No action is required, so we are adjourned. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.